President Biden is outlining his economic agenda as Democrats work to push their tax proposal. The president called on wealthy Americans and corporations to, quote, pay their fair share in taxes. Mr. Biden also said he is confident Congress will deliver the reconciliation package to his desk.
I believe we're at an inflection point in this country. One of those moments where the decisions we're about to make can literally change the trajectory of our nation for years and possibly decades to come. Each inflection point in this nation's history represents a fundamental choice. I believe that America at this moment is facing such a choice. And the choice is this: are we going to continue with an economy where the overwhelming share of the benefits go to big corporations and the very wealthy? Or are we going to take this moment right now to set this country on a new path?
For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist Joel Payne. Hi, Joel. Great to see you. So break down for us the president's plan to fund his $3.5 trillion spending package, which he says addresses a lot of the needs that the country is facing right now.
The president might as well have been Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the Met Gala a few days ago, except he wasn't wearing a dress. He was saying it in the form of text in that speech. It's tax the rich. And I think that's remarkable because just a few years ago, that seemed like a fringe position, right? That seemed like something that was a little bit of a progressive pipe dream. But now you have the president of the United States, who is no one's, progressive, at least the way the story's popularly told. He's a moderate. And this is an accepted political position. And I think that's pretty remarkable. I think what's interesting about this speech, Tanya, is this really pulls together a lot of what the president has been trying to say on a number of dual tracks. It talks about COVID, the importance of pushing back on the COVID pandemic. It's picking a fight with some of these Republican governors in these states that have pledged some of these regressive COVID remedies that are pushing back on vaccine mandates and mask mandates. It's the domestic agenda related to reconciliation and infrastructure bill and really framing it as an economic fairness agenda. And it's talking about some of those things like climate change. And it's more broadly talking about the economy. So you've heard the president talk about all of these things in different places before, but you really have not, I don't believe, heard him speak about it in one combined speech.
It's true. Nothing that the president said here is new, right, Joel? We've heard him say all of these things before in various places, but he did weave it together very tightly in this speech. I want to get to COVID and the climate in a second, but I just want to get to the taxing part of it quickly, because like you said, this is usually never something that a politician comes out and talks about. I want to raise taxes, but he wants to raise taxes on a very specific subset of the American population. And he laid out the fact that many huge corporations and high net worth individuals often manage to pay nothing in taxes. Nothing, get that, big zero. When a fact like that is revealed, it's hard to argue against making those corporations and extremely wealthy individuals pay more in taxes. And it almost doesn't seem it would be a popular political position to defend the fact that they're able to get away with paying so little in taxes. So how are Republicans framing the president's tax plan?
Well, look, Republicans are going to call this a massive government spending bill. They're going to say that it's inflation spending and it's going to harm the economy. And look, they're welcome to make that argument. I think the president essentially dared them to do that. But the fact remains, taxing the rich. I mean, the culture war has been lost on this by conservatives a while ago. This is a 60% issue, at least, depending on the polling you choose. Some polls have it up in 7 in 10 Americans support, taxing the wealthy or taxing the wealthy more fairly, taking it back to pre-Trump tax reform era tax percentages for the wealthy. These are very popular policies that the president is pushing, right? These aren't fringe positions. These are positions that the majority of the American people hold. So what he's really doing is putting a wedge in between Republicans, conservatives, and what they believe, the economic fundamentals they believe in, and what he knows are very popular economic policies. And I think this is kind of tried and true to what the Biden agenda has been. It's been a lot of COVID remedies and a lot of addressing COVID combined with pushing very popular domestic policy remedies. And I think you saw a lot of that in this speech today.
Right. All right. So let's get to the COVID piece of it. How did the president address the impact COVID has had and continues to have on the economy? And who is he now blaming for the fact that we aren't further ahead than he thought we would be at this point?
Well, Tanya, he told it as an economic story, right? He talked about schools being closed and businesses being closed and the specter of that if we don't get COVID under control. And so, again, when you're talking about this contrast message with what Republican governors like Governor DeSantis in Florida, Governor Abbott in Texas are doing versus what the president is pushing, which are vaccine mandates, which are mask mandates, which are social distancing, all the tried and true public health remedies that we've heard a lot about over the last 18 months. The president, again, is putting those policies out front and asking American citizens to make a choice. Who do you trust? What works? And I think we saw it a bit in California with the recent recall results that so resoundingly kept Gavin Newsom in office. I think the president and the administration were buoyed by that. And I think they decided to double down on that message that they saw work for Gavin Newsom in California. But again, framing COVID as an economic issue, you know, Tanya was on the network a little bit earlier this week, and I said, when you look at polling and people say COVID and then they say economy and education, you might as well put COVID next to everything, because everything is about COVID. I know I sound like a broken record, but if you're talking about education, you're talking about COVID because it's keeping schools open. You're talking about the economy, you're talking about COVID because the economy has been impacted. It's been restricted by the pandemic. So that's what the president is betting on here.
And Joel, the president also pointed to the speed at which climate change is hitting our country in the worst ways, which is something that so many Americans have experienced personally. He ties his plan into addressing that. How does he do that?
Well, he framed it again at a very economic base level for people to understand. He put a dollar amount on how much climate change cost the American people in the last year. I believe he quoted the number at $900 billion. Forgive me if I didn't catch that exactly right, but it was a big number. It was somewhere with it, something with a B behind it, which suggests a lot of impact for a lot of regular Americans. By the way, that doesn't just impact blue states, that impacts red states. And he talked about the recent tours that he's done of places like Louisiana and New Jersey that have experienced these climate disasters, in California where you've had wildfires. And he talked about that as a real, almost a unifying message around that, right? Because no American escapes that based on geography or based on political ID. We've all seen these changes to our climate. And I think the president believes that he can paint a more vivid picture about that based on what we've all experienced, combined with the bottom line economic impact. And the president told the story of climate change in a very basic way that people can understand. It's become a real, again, it's a thing that President Biden and his allies have gone back to a lot, which is just really putting the economic toll front and center for Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also it's interesting, it adds urgency to that infrastructure bill, right? Because he talks about not just, bridges that are crumbling and need to be fixed, but highways that need to be raised due to flooding, or all sorts of additional infrastructure supports that need to be added due to climate change. So adds that extra element of urgency.
That's right. And, just Tanya, also to frame back for a second, look, the president was obviously with some of his barbs there going at Republicans and daring Republicans and challenging them. But let's not forget, he's got a couple folks who share political identification and party with him, and folks like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who've been known to be a little sheepish on spending money related to this infrastructure bill. I bet you he was talking to them as well when he's making this case, because every time he's able to make that case publicly and use the bully pulpit of the White House, he makes it harder for Joe Manchin to argue against spending lots of money and investing lots of money in addressing these issues. I know Senator Manchin has talked a lot recently about being concerned about the high price tag of the reconciliation bill. Well, the president may not have been calling him out by name, but he has certainly been calling out the ideology that's guiding Joe Manchin there. So I think you can't miss that as well in this speech.
Joel Payne, thank you so much. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.